Welcome back to Selling Circular, the podcast where we're rethinking the status quo of capitalism by exploring innovations in the circular economy. And today we're talking tool libraries, a concept that continues to revolutionize how communities think about ownership, sharing, and sustainability. I'm Gar Punnett, CEO of LoopLayer.
I'm Sabira Lakhani, VP of Product at Reaply. If this is your first time joining us, we're thrilled to have you as part of our growing community, and we are dedicated to advancing the circular economy. And the best way to help our growth is to share clips, subscribe, or tell your friends and colleagues about the podcast. Imagine a place where you can borrow tools and equipment instead of buying them. This is my dream. You could save
Yes.
money and reduce waste at the same time. And that's what tool libraries offer. And they're becoming an increasingly important part of the circular economy nationwide. Our guest today.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say, though, I have not visited my local tool library. I continue, and Tessa knows this. We are addressing this live, but I need to get there. So yes, so you'll maybe even hear that come up today.
Yeah, I have wondered why public libraries don't already do this. Like, why isn't
totally.
it a thing?
Yeah,
And I've thought
and
about.
they probably do. Some of them I know do a little bit of it, but
Oh,
how are
yeah,
they? But how are they? That's not what they're supposed to do. So they
I
might get
know.
things here and
They
there,
have the
but
space.
yeah, they
I
do have the
know.
space. Yeah.
Well, then I've thought about just start one in like a garage. But hearing from Tessa just made me understand that it's not that simple. It's pretty straightforward, but it's not simple.
I love the way you just brought that up too, because I've actually thought about how do you use the spaces that are also in the basements of, in my
Hmm.
part of the world of Chicago, we have lots of like basement spaces that are governed by our HOA but aren't anything. Like they're just literally
Hmm.
empty. And it's like, oh,
Hmm.
how cool would that be to set up something small between your neighbors? Just something that isn't, supposed to
Yeah.
scale, but
Yeah.
maybe you could even set it across the neighborhood.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, like apartment buildings are the best, especially in cities.
Yeah.
Like your basement, if you live in an apartment building, you already have scale. You already have a bunch of potential customers to
Yeah.
share with
Yeah.
that could just be in your building. And
Neighborhood
I'm
scale.
thinking about
Yeah.
that for our, townhome community. And why don't maybe we
Yeah,
should
you guys,
start one?
you also have a really interesting, because you guys are kind of you're like compartmentalized a little bit off a little neighborhood onto itself.
Yeah.
And how could you sort of start something with the folks that are moving in?
Yeah. I think what has felt, at least in my last apartment complex, like it didn't feel really easy to create friendships or connections with neighbors. And I'm getting the vibe here too that it's not going to be like just I gave a
Right.
box of chocolates to everybody in this row of townhomes and nobody said thank you. Like not one person has,
What I
has
love
been
about
like,
you
what's up?
what I love about you saying that is there's zero chance anybody's listening to our podcast. So
Yeah, there we
unless somehow they have found you and then they're gonna be like, oh, Sapira.
But then like come say what's up.
Yeah.
Like
Yes. Come say what's up. Yes. Yeah. And okay, so maybe we can get that going over a shared hammer. That's really the goal there. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. Our guest today is Tessa Veer, co-founder of Chicago Tool Library, which we're so excited to hear from her. She does not officially speak for the broader tool library community because it is burgeoning, but her team is a great representation of the model. And her grassroots organization has not only saved Chicagoans over $2 million in tool rentals and purchases, but has also become this like very cool community hub. I haven't been
That
there, but
is
I've heard.
Well, that from what she was telling us, that was one of the coolest aspects. So, from helping supply neighbors during flood emergencies to hosting repair fairs, the Chicago Tool Library is redefining what it means to be a resilient, connected community. So, again, go meet a neighbor over at that hammer. Tessa's journey from food, sustainability to tool libraries is a fascinating one, and her insights into building a culture of sharing and community engagement was really inspiring. And again, especially in that time of resiliency and repairing communities. So let's learn more about how tool libraries are shaping the future of sustainable urban living. And unlike me, but I'm remedying it quickly, just go check out that tool library that's near you and do yourself a favor. I would love for you to talk to our audience about how this idea sort of percolated that this would be something that you were passionate about and wanted to see through, because I'm sure you've been seeing it through some crazy times, some ups and downs, and all of that. But really, how did you start sort of with this concept of saying, oh, I've seen these types of tool libraries around. I think I really feel for this. I think I want to bring this to the Chicago community.
Yeah, so my a lot of my career history is in food, which is, some people are surprised by, but I think for me, what got me really interested in food is really actually pretty similar to the tool library, believe it or not. I'm really interested in people having sort of core competencies and skills in their lives to be healthy and be productive and to be engaged with the planet. And so for me, food was always kind of like kind of like an extension of community care. And through my work and exploration of food, I really got to see a lot of exciting community spaces. And I think that community gardens and the growing of food really brings people together in really creative ways. And it's very also like space dependent, like it requires space. So through that kind of curiosity about community space and in community care, I learned a lot about alternative community spaces like Mother Hubbard's Cupboard in Southern Indiana, which is like a kind of like a rad, like new wave food pantry where they have like gardens and they give out free produce and they have cooking classes. It's really just like a more um, cozy kind of place to get access to food than just like a sterile sort of room with shelves of canned food. And they also have a tool library element at their food pantry where people can not only get access to free food, but they can actually get the tools to grow their own food. And so I just sort of was really inspired through my work in food, by gathering people together and seeing what people can create together. And all that led back to the concept of tool libraries, which when I moved back to Chicago, which is, I think, a really uniquely creative city that has a lot of space, actually, like, again, the idea concept of space. Chicago is a city that actually you can access land and space more easily than other large cities. And it's also a pretty livable city where people have time and energy to commit to helping their community. And so the tool library concept, I just sort of started asking people here, like, do we have one? Has anybody heard of this concept? Has anybody done this? And it turned out that there really wasn't one here in Chicago, but people really wanted one here in Chicago. So that's kind of where I got started.
In the time since when you did start, and I mean, this is the fun part about having this conversation. You and I met now probably
5 or 6 years ago.
Maybe
Yeah,
6 or 7.
maybe.
It's maybe 6. But that was I was there for you, sort of kicking that idea around. And it's so funny. I love these naive moments for myself where it was not even a remote possibility that was something that would be relevant to people's daily lives. And it was like, oh, but as you introduced me to it, was like, oh, of course. Like, and even now as I'm pursuing more hobbies and more things that I want to construct, I always am like, I have to get down there. Like, I have to like see what sort of tools I can work with. In that 6 years, how has the concept evolved from what you thought it was going to be to what it is today?
Oh my gosh. So I think what's really cool about tool libraries is that they are all really different and they're all really responsive to the community. So I always knew that, when we were creating a tool library for Chicago, we had a lot of inspiration. Like there's tool libraries in Edinburgh, in Honolulu, in Auckland, in Denver, in Missoula. We kind of could lean on all these other tool libraries for inspiration, but ultimately we would need to adapt to Chicagoans' needs. So in getting started, I didn't have any idea where it would go, but I knew that we would need to listen. And so when we first started, we were very small and we tried to stay nimble so that we could, again, like adapt. In the past 5 years, we've grown from a space that was about 1,200 square feet to over 7,000 square feet. We have tools and equipment for DIY and repair and gardening, of course, as our name suggests, tool library, but we also have stuff that Chicagoans really want access to. like camping gear. That's one that's really cool and exciting to me. Chicagoans, it's a tough region, the Midwest, to get out into nature. It's not as accessible or as exciting as, out west,
So
for
all of
example.
our
So
famous mountains here in Chicago.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So like
yeah.
Chicagoans don't necessarily own their own camping gear. It's like a high barrier to entry. It's expensive. Who's got the closet space? So camping gear is a cool thing that I think we're able to offer. A lot of families go camping for their first time with the Chicago Tool Library to find out if if they're a camping family before they invest in the gear. We also have kitchen equipment, KitchenAid mixers, food dehydrators. We have a lot of stuff for parties and events, which is huge. Um, we've also grown to have a whole new collection of tools to help our local nonprofits. So we now also have tools for nonprofits and block clubs and churches and schools to borrow. And that's been really cool to see that program develop, because for a lot of the same reasons that individual Chicagoans like don't have the money or space for all the stuff they need, nonprofits have the same problem. They don't have the extra storage room and shed to put on that big program that needs tons of tables and canopies and whatever else they need. So we're really filling a need for a lot of people. It's been really cool to iterate and see how we can help people out by centralizing and sharing resources.
I love that you had inspiration from others before. Are you all part of like a formal network together? Is there like a blueprint of some like centralized body that tries to organize? Like how do the like org dynamics work?
Well, you're asking that question at a cool time, actually, because the tool library universe has always been kind of informally connected. We've had like a Google group for a decade, I don't know, a long time. But at this exact moment, like right now, actually, there's a group called Shareable, and they're building a toolkit to start tool libraries. They've been doing a series of webinars to help people launch their own tool libraries. And the Chicago Tool Library is also one of the founding members of the new National Tool Library Alliance. So, really excited about that. We meet once a month and we're working together to help support and promote new tool libraries, but also support and advocate for existing tool libraries to make sure that we're sustainable and that we're all working together in this, effort. So it's a cool time for tool libraries, actually.
That is cool to hear like the evolution. And are you worried about um I guess like how much would there be the balance of retaining that like local adaptability versus like standardization and best good practice, but you could get really rigid if you go too far in that direction. So kind of what's the direction?
I think that there's a lot of building blocks that are really important for any tool library. I mean, much like a business, it's like we rely on software, we rely on philanthropy, we rely on lease agreements with landlords. There's a lot of ways we can support new tool libraries with some of the scaffolding. No tool pun intended, but like kind of those building blocks of like, what are you going to need to have in place to build this obviously creative and dynamic space? But there are some things that we all need to have together, and it's kind of tough to pull together for nonprofits. So we can kind of help standardize some of the boring, foundational puzzle pieces for people, and maybe someday even provide our own grants, our own startup funds, and some mentorship to new tool libraries. So it's really kind of exciting to see this come together.
Well, that seems like the natural then extension is how you're getting more tool libraries to start, or incentivizing or even inspiring their start. In that community, I mean, obviously you all are great people. It's going to be very inclusive. You're going to get
Yes.
you're going to get interest where people are like, "Hey, how do I do this?" And you guys are going to be like, "Here's everything I did to start my tool library, and there's what you could do." But what's that, just to decrease that barrier of entry for anybody who's like kicking that idea around? How do you start? I mean, clearly reaching out to you all for some sort of resources, or reaching out online and sort of seeing how everything, you guys are piecing it together through your various websites. But what's your go-to piece of advice? How does one go, okay, I see this need, this is how I can make this happen in my community?
Honestly, there is not that. I wish there was,
Okay.
because Because like I said, some of those like foundational puzzle pieces are super different from community to community. Like in Chicago, finding space is hard. The city of Chicago is a huge, complicated bureaucracy, and they're never going to give us a building. But if you live in a smaller community, maybe your local village council is like, hey, we've got this free building, we'd love for you to activate it, stuff like that, you know? So it's really, really dependent on where you are. If there's an existing nonprofit that could maybe turn a tool library into a program of their existing work, there's a lot of ways to go about getting a tool library started. But I think it's important to just ask around. That's the biggest piece is like, kind of, if you're curious about the concept, see if people are surprised all the time. People will be like, oh, I wish I had this in my city or community. And I'll just ask, where do you live? And they're like, I'm in Seattle. I'm like, there's literally like 5 tool libraries in Seattle. Sometimes people just don't even know that they're
They don't even
there.
Google it. Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, you'd be surprised how many are out there. And if they're not, I wouldn't jump to like, let's make one. I would just like put feelers out, see who somebody might be talking about it already. Like
Hmm.
some other nonprofit could be a super great fit to add that to their existing programming and budget. So it's not a profitable project. It's not profitable. So you need to plan very carefully for how you're going to sustain it. Um, and yeah, it takes some thinking for sure.
Well, I was gonna ask, I was gonna wanted to go in that direction. So how does the average person interact with the tool library? Like what is the model to sustain it? And then it sounds like there's some deficit there. So how do you fill that gap?
So, the Chicago Tool Library is pretty unique because we are one of the biggest cities to have a tool library. So, our engagement is astronomical. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of users. Um, so, the way that we sustain here is mostly through a pay what you can membership model. So, anybody in Chicago can sign up for a membership at our tool library, pay what they can for their membership for the year, and that's our main source of income. Uh, That's over 50% of our income at the Chicago Tool Library. Like I said, other tool libraries, they maybe are in smaller communities and they need to rely more on local government support or philanthropy. Every nonprofit, every business is unique in how its funding model it kind of operates in the local economy. But at the Chicago Tool Library, like I mentioned before, our government is, you know, it's tough to get in with them. So we really need to be pretty scrappy and grassroots with our work. And we're just lucky that we have the volume of users that we're able to do that.
That's really cool. And then the how do you maintain with thousands of users? I'm just thinking about the logistics of that. How does that work to be able to facilitate so many different transactions, rentals, borrowing, so many different types of things and managing your inventory? It sounds like a bear.
Let's We felt empowered again because other tool libraries have done it. Software is a huge piece of what we do. Like a lot of, any sort of like high, like you said, a lot of transactions, a lot of logistics. And so software is huge. We actually built our own software at the Chicago Tool Library. Um, my co-founder, Jim Benton, is his software developer by trade. So he actually decided that he wanted to create a software for the Chicago Tool Library. There's other softwares out there that other tool libraries use that are totally great. But ours allows us to, yeah, to be as busy as we are and to adapt and interact, with our users and with our community exactly how we want to cut down on admin because our team is tiny. We have like one full-time, soon to be 2 full-timers and 3 part-timers. That's it. We're small. So our having control over our software allows us to, if we're getting a lot of questions about a particular topic, we can kind of nip it in the bud. We can like find the software solution to be like, how do we make this information more visible to people so that they're not emailing us all the time? Or how do we created wait lists, hold lists. People can log into their member profiles just like the public library. They can reserve things, they can renew things. So we're not actually, we're putting a lot of a lot of kind of the interactions and the transactions on the plate of the users, which gives them control, but also allows us to serve more people.
What is the future for that software as you start to aggregate similar organizations nationally? Is this something, and if we're getting cart before the horse here a little bit on what you plan to do with it, it seems like a really shareable resource.
It's open source right now.
Okay.
So anybody can go look it up. It's called Circulate.
That's excellent.
Can use use it. It's not currently multi-tenant, not to get too in the weeds, but like currently we have not built the capacity to host several organizations on it, but maybe we will. But in any case, if you have a strong software capacity on your team and you're interested in doing some sort of lending program, it's open source and it's out there. And our team is growing all the time on that. Our software developers are all volunteers. They're incredible. I wish I could give them like some sort of Chicago Hero Award, because it's like seriously heroic that they're doing software development after their software development job. For us, it's like kind of blows my mind and makes me want to cry, but just from gratitude.
Well, that speaks to then your ability to, or really the mission of the organization then collects those like-minded folks who are really passionate about providing this service. Can you speak, two-parter question, can you speak to those that want to be a part of that mission and how they stick around? Because clearly they do, and they want to help and continue. And then the impact that it drives in the community and what you guys have seen and what you guys have done.
Oh, man. I mean, I think that our people is our strongest asset at the Chicago Tool Library. And I like, not to be corny, but, we are an organization that started in 2019. We were kind of getting our footing right around COVID-19, right around a lot of the social justice reckoning we had kind of worldwide in 2020. And we really had the opportunity to set set the tone of our organization in a way that wasn't just kind of going along with the status quo of how a nonprofit or how a workplace should operate, because I think it is the imperative of all of us to be kind of not taking things for granted and trying to change where we can. All that to say, we've built a really generous culture of, kindness and respect, and kind of helping make sure we understand everybody's motivations for being in our space. Some people want to learn, some people want to volunteer because they want to use those awesome professional skills they have for good. And I think that if you guys are talking to folks in industry and especially in tech, a lot of people working in tech are like working on government contracts or things that they're like feeling feelings about, and they want to use those skills for projects that really make them happy. But at the same time, we've got people who want to like totally clock out from their day job and they want to like move some stuff around and like get sweaty, and like some people want to meet friends. Some people want to just like veg out and just do something monotonous. So I think it's the same thing with any place, if you're trying to get a project done, you really need to understand the motivations of your people, of your team. And that's a big way that we keep people long-term, is we really make a point to understand their motivations.
Well, I kind of love the dual purpose then. You're both a hub for those who have a purpose and a need for something in their life, and a hub and a purpose for someone who need to meet people, need to meet more friends and do things that are getting them out of their box. And so it's that dual social function that I think is unique to the point you made earlier, physical spaces, and especially in circular economy, that it's all about geographically almost local, hyper-local potential solutions that bring people together around the stuff that's around us.
Yep. And it's like just being sensitive, like being, again, like just not taking anything for granted, not taking people's time for granted, not taking normal ways of volunteerism and organizing volunteers, and just really being thoughtful about people's time is really important.
Totally. My second parter on that question to press you guys crunched any numbers on impact? Like, is there anything that y'all have in terms of saying, look at this? I mean, look at this amazing example.
Yeah, hopefully we'll have more next year, but kind of especially now that we lend tools to community groups, I think that's going to be kind of like an impact multiplier when we're getting tools in the hands of not just people in their homes, but organizations in their communities. But I mean, we've saved Chicagoans over $2 million in tool rentals or purchases. I think that's really exciting. We personally at the Chicago Tool Library don't do a lot of like, carbon counting, that kind of stuff, some of those like normal environmental impacts, because I kind of think it isn't necessarily the true environmental or sustainability impact of tool libraries. And I think that I don't want to ramble too much, but I have a lot to say about that.
This is literally the point. This is a rambling environment. And what I love what you're saying in there is it's an economic and a social function, probably more than anything.
Oh yeah,
but I want you to ramble. Like, let's go.
But okay, so I think that economically, economics is the biggest motivator of people. Let's be honest. Like, that's what people want when they come to the Chicago Tool Library. When people spend their money and their time on something, like, they want to save. That's number one. We're an errand on their day. We're not like the center of anybody's universe, and they're just trying to get what they need for as little money as possible. We do that. I love that about us. But we also bring people together and make them feel really happy that they get to go to a really cool place in their community that they can walk into, that they can meet neighbors, that they can ask questions, that they can be, respected, and they can be excited about, the possibilities for their lives. So there's like that creativity and social piece, but the environmental piece is there too. I don't think it's top of people's minds, but I think that's also kind of cool because we're really helping socialize sustainability in a way that is easy and familiar, and it's kind of incidental, that people are kind of making the right environmental choice on accident. But I think the future of tool libraries, to kind of take things in a less sunny direction, is like, I'm really, really right now very fired up and motivated about tool libraries as community resilience hubs, like direct climate response. Last summer, the west side of Chicago, where we are located, which is a historically very disinvested part of Chicago, experienced disaster level flooding. I don't know if you two knew this, but the west side of Chicago is declared a FEMA disaster zone. And
well, that is wild that I don't know that, because again, right? that speaks to my lack of want to tap into local news sometimes. But even then, if I read local news, I don't see that. And that speaks to that divestment of story, yes, of representation, of not recognizing what might be happening in our city, but just not in the most recognized part of our city.
Well, and we even helped. We actually wrote all of our news outlets and was like, listen to these people, because here in Chicago, in a climate, what do we call them? I don't know what we're calling them anymore, of just like safe area, place where people see, whatever, there is no such thing. But on the west side of Chicago last summer, our infrastructure in Chicago is so outdated that our sewer systems could not handle the amount of water that was coming through the sewer systems. And so it was backing up into thousands of people's basements. What are we going to do? And we were there on the west side. We have carpet fans, we have shop vacs, we have sump pumps, we have all this stuff. And we were able to partner with local organizations that came together like that. Long-term recovery groups formed. We were there. And that really got me thinking. And then, what do you know? A few months later, we're Asheville. Who saw the flooding that was happening there? And who's helping on the ground? The Asheville Tool Library is there. They're sharpening chainsaws. They have generators. They're helping people charge their devices. They are maintaining tools. And I think that this is so important. And I actually had the opportunity to talk to some city governments in the coming weeks. And I really, really want to advocate for tool libraries as resilience hubs, not for every day, for helping people be more sustainable and, improving quality of life on the day-to-day and the good times, but also to be a on-the-ground resource on those awful days when we really need tools bad.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking like I actually just drove past our neighboring towns like Department of Public Works building. Um, and it when you drive past it at night, it looks like a dead space, but I imagine like during the day it's a live space where like trucks are coming in and out. And but every city has them, and I don't know how much they collaborate together, but this, what you're talking about, sounds like an additional infrastructure to support them because they might not have everything that they need, or they might need more than what they have. And this really allows for resilience is the right word, but I'm thinking like buffer supply,
Yes,
buffer
it has to
resource,
be
buffer
there.
labor.
Especially with the way that people have moved away from the trades in recent generations. My basement, I live on the west side. My basement flooded. I couldn't get contractors to come out to help me because they were overloaded. There's just a degree to which there's always going to be a need for individuals to have the option to take on projects themselves. It just needs to be there. And if people can't afford to own all those tools, and they shouldn't, what are we going to do to help make sure that our communities are strong, that they're safe, that people have homes that aren't filled with mold and water? I think there's the tool libraries are a really lovely solution to help communities just be stronger.
Speaking again to that social function of enabling trust, and in times of
Yeah,
panic and
totally.
in times of chaos, maybe of dysfunction in system or system breakdown, a familiar organization coming in and helping point in directions, even to national or state level agencies, can be very helpful in addressing quick problems or addressing solutions for these problems. I love that resilience note. I'm going to be thinking about that for the rest of the day because it kind of gave me it truthfully kind of gave me chills because it's probably one of the more visceral anecdotes I've heard in a long time of circular economy, sustainability action, that it hits on all of the right notes and then provides this future focused support girdle of some sort.
And the solution's right there. It's right
Right.
there, and and we've been doing it already. And that's what's cool
Hmm.
about tool libraries. Is like this isn't a new solution. This is just something we need to pay attention to. There's a lot of really, really
Yeah.
caring, community-focused people across the world, and if we could kind of spread the word and awareness about this as a solution, tool libraries can do amazing things because the tool libraries aren't doing the things, honestly. It's the people. It's like we're there to help people do amazing things.
I am
I,
curious, when you got started, how did you start to build that awareness, and how has that changed also over time as you've gotten more traction? Like, how do you get people to volunteer and also to use the tool library for the tools?
I think, we've been, for me, perception has been huge. Um, Being as reliable and welcoming as possible has been huge because when we create a space that feels safe, feels, interesting, feels like approachable, the people are going to tell their friends about it. So, even from when we first opened, we really thought about libraries. We really kind of own that, even though it's a little confusing. We do really kind of embrace the library part of our name because libraries are safe, they're familiar, they're welcoming, they're intergenerational. When we designed our logo, we didn't want it to be really like tool focused. We wanted it to feel like this is a space anybody can come into. Even if you don't think you understand what your project is yet, or you don't feel like you know about tools, we still want you to come talk to us. And we hire our staff to really be focused on the customer service skills more than anything. So I think that's been really big, is just building a very earnest and sincere culture of helping people. And when we designed our software, that was also part of it. we ask people for their preferred pronouns and their preferred names that are maybe different from their government names. And um, we just really make an effort to feel like a place that people want to invest in and they want to come back to. And that brings us volunteers, that brings us recommendations, that, it's kind of made us who we are. And I don't think that that's necessarily like, building a culture around a community space, I think you just have to do things that way. You just have to.
What is, in terms of then, we've talked about what it is to bring people together, the proof that you all have of being a social connection hub, both for purpose and utility of tools. How do you communicate that to your local government? What have you learned over the past couple of years on how to best represent yourself in the eyes of your local municipality, in this case, the city of Chicago, which can be complicated, also filled with good people, but we have complicated systems. How has that evolved? What's your advice for people even with your colleagues, your industry colleagues? Anything that you can share about what they do and how that sort of communication goes hand in hand with local governments?
Honestly, we're still figuring it out.
Okay.
So I think that for the average person, the concept of a tool library is a no-brainer. They're like,
right.
Oh, duh. Like, I can borrow stuff so I don't have to buy it. That sounds great for me. And like, that makes a lot of sense. As far as governments go and philanthropy and some of these like larger institutions, it's a little bit more of a head scratcher of like, how are they supposed to engage with us? They don't really know because we aren't a traditional funding priority. We're not like, we don't really meet the ticket for like a normal sustainability project of like cleaning the waterways or reducing emissions or,
whose fault is that? That doesn't seem
exactly.
like...
Well,
right.
exactly. And that's why I think it's important for the Tool Library Alliance to come together, for these conversations to be happening, because when we build awareness, we start to change the definitions of what sustainability and what urban sustainability is. And I think that's what you guys are doing, talking about circular economies, which is somewhat new, but we need to be really, I think we talked about this last time we talked, Gar, about like how the narrative around sustainability or environmentalism needs to change really fast. And it's not all just, forests out. Like, we need to think about sustainability in an urban environment. And I think that tool libraries are a piece of that. I think that it's not all about our water and our air. It totally is. And we should be funding that big time. But let's also get creative. Let's also see how circular economies, how sharing economies can be a piece of the conversation around sustainability, because it has not been historically. And so people with money don't know what to do with us.
It's so interesting because, and that's funny because I love that you leaned into the term library because again, you said, right, like it's familiar to people. So I find it interesting that it's like public good is foreign to governments because like they're the ones who do it. I don't know. That's funny.
People take libraries for granted. Our libraries are just funded. Have you ever had to go to a fundraiser for a library? Have you ever had to, make a donation to a library? People aren't used to they're not used to having to think about having to fund libraries. And so they're not really prepared to give up space for other kinds of libraries because they're like, a library is already, and that's why some tool libraries are actually part of public library systems.
Do you think this is in part to challenging a traditional idea? Not even traditional. I shouldn't even say that. But the idea, our modern idea of ownership. Do you think in part there's some part of this where they're like, I don't really understand that.
But that's also like Uber. Things? Like Uber is a thing. Like what I'm saying? Like I'm just
don't look at me like I'm somehow the one.
Sharing is familiar. Sharing is so familiar, but it's not familiar in our sort of economic systems, in our government systems. It's not really accounted for.
You know what I would challenge though on Uber as an example is I think people don't think of that as vehicle sharing. I think to some degree, because I even think I might lose that concept. What I think of it as is like, I even think of like, I'm strange that I'm coming to this. Like somehow I own that experience. Like it's for me in
Right.
some right. Like is that check out? It's
Even
like,
like
oh, this is
Airbnb.
servicing me. This is my
Mhm.
this is as opposed to like I'm a part of a broader network of people
We're all using this
exchange
resource.
right who are all using the
Yes.
resource and
Right.
exchanging that resource back and forward. And so I think that kind of that's interesting because I need to start thinking of it more like what Uber really is.
Right. And that's what I think like they have designed the customer and user experience to feel that way so that
Yes,
it's similar
exactly.
to ownership feelings so
Yes,
that it's not.
exactly.
But and that goes back to your point, Tessa, about like community, which is like you strip away community from Uber, you strip away community from Airbnb. We're still like a
Yes.
very independent,
Yes, exactly.
invisible hand kind of society. And I really love that you kind of are going against the grain there and leaning into the community. And so now it's checking out for me more the resistance to that.
Exactly. Well, and some people would be like, when thinking about a project like this, I think our instincts are they're so zoned in on that sort of
Yeah.
individualistic perspective. People be like, well, you could turn a tool library project into what if it was an app? Or what if it was like an Amazon locker type thing? And that it's like convenience at all costs.
Right.
And it's like, sure, we could do that, but what are we losing if we do that? It's like you gain again some degree of convenience and maybe more volume. I don't know, but I don't think that's as interesting. And I think that I get really excited about third spaces like libraries of like physical and reclaiming space for people, like not for companies, not for businesses. And
Yeah.
like it just makes me really sad when I see the way that our city here in Chicago, you'll see like a vacancy and then what gets put in it, it's some corporation, it's corporations. And I don't think people are realizing how quickly the face of our city is changing and how um, kind of radical and crucial it is to save space and take up space for just existing, just like people
Me too.
being and not buying stuff. Like those places are getting carved away.
Well, actually,
Well,
think that like, sorry, Gar, that's like, I think you're also then fighting loneliness, right? Like community
Exactly.
spaces. Like if you think about our space in our cities is getting smaller. So like that also is what you're providing, right? Alternative storage. But then because you're in small spaces, you can't host friends as
Right.
much. You can't like that sense of like I'm creating community around me goes away. It with the decline in religious activity that also kind of starts to evaporate or you don't have that sense of community. So I am like super jazzed about what you're offering and I'm also curious like do you guys do like nighttime activities? Because that's the other thing I think about. Like, you can't host your friends. So, like, can you use library space in the evening for like social hangouts or anything? Has that ever been like something that y'all have considered?
Well, so we have this room in our library, and like again, this is another cool thing about tool libraries is every tool library, like their programs and their events are really bonkers, and they're all so different, and I love them all. Like Louisville Tool Library is like brand new and like super radical, very anti-capitalist, and they do like these awesome little like knitting circles called Stitch and Bitch, and they have these like people just like come hang out and like drink beer and like knit. I'm like, hell yeah, that's awesome. And like we've been hosting
I,
at Chicago Tool
the
Library, like
counterculture element of that is that's
oh
pretty cool. That it fosters that. Yeah.
yeah, it's but like and there's like we have at Chicago Tool Library, we've just been branching into because we've just been so busy with just lending. We started hosting this awesome group called Ujima Medics, who are all Black medical professionals who train people, anyone, they'll train anyone in first aid and CPR and gunshot wound response. So we've hosted them to do gunshot wound response training in our space. We have repair fairs about once a month where people can come bring their broken items and we will fix it for them, all of our skilled volunteers. And that's a super intergenerational event. And we had somebody in last time who was really touched because she was like, there's a lot of like older women who come to these events with their broken items. And she was just like really moved because she was like, man, she was just really thinking about the loneliness question, about especially with our elders, and like having that support of a place where they can have a problem solved for them. We can like actually come here and a very nice 30-year-old will fix their lamp for them, and they get to hang out and eat snacks and talk to people, and like yeah, being that hub for people getting their needs met, but also making friends and just feeling like they're in a place that cares about them is just I never want that to go away.
I get a lot of inspiration from this podcast, but actually, I just want to say out loud that my sister and I have been talking for a long time about bridging like Indian culture with Western culture, and also community, like having a nighttime bar that doesn't have alcohol and just like having a space to hang out. And
You can come volunteer with us in the evenings.
Yeah.
We're open till 7, BYOB. You can do some sorting.
Like that, I'm like feeling really, if I had to like say, okay, out of all the interviews that we've done, here's the thing I want to do in my life. I think starting a tool library, that human element, I think, is really tough to come by these days, where it's like naturally there. And I'm really excited to hear that you've been able to do that.
Just getting in your feels on this podcast right now.
Seriously.
I get my feels on the regular about tool libraries. But I think what's exciting too is if people plug into Tool Library, their local tool library, is you actually like, the tool library is not the end of it. Like, we're a part of a bigger community of folks doing rad stuff. Like, we're plugged into local, architects and designers, and some folks just built a new building in North Lawndale that's like this awesome new community third space too. Like opening your eyes to people trying to build those centers for connection is so important, and they need your investment. Like, if you care about third spaces, if you care about gathering and community connection, show up to their events, give them your donations, and just be a part of it, because it's something that deserves our time, because I just think it's so important for all of our health as a society.
I mean, on that note, raw thought here, so bear with me on wherever this goes. I loved your term of plugged in, because it's juxtaposed to all of the devices that are pulling us apart that we keep plugged in. So I think there's something to that from you're the conduit to that social function. That if you're lacking that potentially in your life, or you're all you're doing is doom scrolling, tapping into those local resources. It may not be a Chicago Tool Library. It may be some other social, some sort of social hub but go outside, go find that resource, and that's what's going to potentially, I'm not here to prescribe, but I know that it makes me feel whole to go out and interact with people around something that I care about and that I want to do. So whether that is a stitch and bitch, get out there, go talk about the things that you're passionate about, and reconnect with those that feel the same.
Well, and we have in Chicago too, because again, if people are listening to this podcast, they're interested in circular economies and sustainability, probably. But the folks in this world are cool. And I want to say, man, there's like a group, Chicago Climate Connect. Is that right?
Yeah. There is.
Here in Chicago. Yeah. And that group has been doing a bunch of like meetups, and they do like panel discussions and stuff. And I did one, and I met Paul. Shout out to Paul, specifically, he was like a software developer. Again, like one of those people who was like looking to kind of find more meaning in his professional life and trying to pivot to climate work with his work. And he came and crushed it, helped with our software project, and now he's on our board of directors, and he's just like the best. So like the compounding benefits of just getting out there, like not that we all just like need direct benefits, to like, yeah, thanks Paul, you're the best, but like it really, like the connections are just out there to be made. We all want this. I think we're all desperate for connection, and we're all really desperate to feel like we're doing something that matters.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't know how we got all the way from tool libraries to just like advocating for people to like be friendly and social, but like it makes sense, because that's what we do every day.
As we start to wrap up our time together, it's been such a joy, and it sounds like there's a lot of hope already. I think like it sounds like you've birthed Chicago Tool Library with like a lot of hope and love and
So much
kindness.
hope.
And tell us like where you want this to go in the future. What are you hopeful about?
Oh man, I'm hopeful. Like I'm kind of like an intense person. And like I'm sort of like, I found a way to like channel my ambition and my like love for my community to something that feels really important. So for me, I'm just like personally, this is just my personal thing. Like I'm ready to freaking fight for this concept. We've got our national group together. For me, this is like my little spot that I'm excited about. And as a personal effort, like I just feel really hopeful and excited about my um possibility like my I think I can make a lot of change in this tiny little sliver of circular economy. So that for me, I'm just like gets me fired up. It's just like it's possible. But for the whole tool library movement, like it's just so beautiful and obvious. What's not to love? The more the other great thing about tool libraries is like we're not in competition. There's no such thing as too much sharing. So like even if someone were to start another tool library in Chicago, I would be like, yeah, let's do it. So it's like there's something really beautiful about that, and that the only thing we can do is just support the concept and keep it going and spread the word. So it's like there's something really wonderful about that. It's not complicated, it's straightforward, it's beautiful, and we can only use more. So like what's not to be hopeful about that? We also just have too much stuff in the US. So like there's too much stuff. Let's put it in some rooms and let people use it.
Let's not have it sit alone in the dark. Let's get
Yeah,
it
it's
to
just like
use. Yeah.
all these uncles in their garages. We've got to get some places for that stuff to go.
Tessa, again, the hope and inspiration is flowing here, but more importantly, probably is the purpose for people and what they can connect around with the stuff that's abundant. So thank you for sharing.
So much abundance.
So much abundance. Thank you for sharing. It's an excellent segue into how do you find potentially your niche into circular economy? How can you find what your sliver of impact could be? Someone should look into this. It's a great start. If anybody's looking to donate or support, where should they go?
They should go to chicagotoollibrary.org. But also, again, maybe there's a tool library where you live and they need you too. So look up tool libraries, figure out if there's one near you, and like your impact, whatever donation will go so far because tool libraries are all very small. So please give them your money.
Google it and walk in the door. That's homework for anybody listening. Okay, good.
Totally.
Thank you, Tessa.
Thanks,
Thank
Tessa.
you.